The wind carried a sharp bite that late afternoon as Cal Rourke rode along the high ridge overlooking Bitter Creek. The water ran wild from spring melt, cutting fast through the rocks below. His horse, Dusty, moved with quiet steadiness, but Cal's eyes kept flicking down toward the creek, unease growing in his gut. Something didn't feel right. He told himself it was nothing, maybe just the memory of last year's flood. But his grip on the reins tightened anyway. That creek had taken a man once. He wasn't about to let it take another if he could help it. Cal didn't live for much beyond keeping his fence lines tight and his land free of trouble. A war veteran and a rancher who kept more to himself than most, he had long ago sworn off anything that stirred up emotion. Love, regret, even hope. They'd all proved more pain than they were worth. He had rules. Never interfere with other folks' mess. Never get close. Never save someone just to end up losing more of yourself. He lived quiet, worked hard, and spoke little. That's how he liked it. But then he saw her, a figure in the creek, flailing against the current, arms slapping the water, head dipping under again and again. His breath caught. Without thinking, Cal kicked Dusty hard. The horse tore down the slope, dirt flying behind him. Cal didn't know how deep the creek had gotten since last week, but it didn't matter. He flung himself in the saddle as soon as they reached the bank, boots splashing into the ice-cold water. She was maybe 15 yards out, caught in the middle, being dragged toward the bend where the rocks narrowed and the water sped up. Her skirt tangled around her legs, and her dark hair plastered across her face. She gasped once more before going under. Cal charged in, cold ripping through him like a blade, fighting the current as he reached for her. He grabbed fabric, her dress, maybe, and yanked hard. She surfaced, coughing, her hands grasping blindly. "Hold on," he shouted, locking an arm around her waist. The creek slammed against them both, but Cal planted his boots and pushed them backward, step by step, until they collapsed on the bank. He was soaked to the bone, lungs burning, heart hammering in his chest. The girl lay beside him, shivering violently, her lips tinged blue, but alive, thin as a rail, scrapes on her arms, torn dress, no shoes. Her face was streaked with mud, but her eyes, green and glassy with shock, found his. There was something in them, not just fear, shame, guilt, and something that looked a lot like relief. She tried to speak, but coughed instead. Cal sat up, peeling off his soaked coat. "Here," he said, draping it over her. "Don't talk yet. You're okay. You're out of the water." But she shook her head slowly. I'm not." "What do you mean?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "I wasn't supposed to be saved." The words chilled him worse than the water had. He stared at her, unsure what to say. She wasn't just drowning. She had wanted to, or thought she had to. He looked around. No wagon. No footprints leading in. Just her alone and broken. "What's your name?" She didn't answer. Just turned her head away. He didn't push. They sat in silence. Only the sound of the creek and the wind in the trees around them. He didn't ask any more questions. Not yet. Instead, he helped her to his horse, lifted her gently, and led them both back to the ranch. That night, as the rain began to fall and she slept beneath his roof, curled under blankets in the small spare room, Cal sat by the stove, staring into the fire. Her words echoed in his ears. "I wasn't supposed to be saved." He should have gone to town, handed her off to the law or the preacher. But he didn't. Something in her had struck something buried deep in him. Something he'd tried hard to forget. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him like she didn't deserve to be alive. Maybe it was how familiar that felt. The next morning, he asked again, "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Clara." He didn't believe that was her real name, but he nodded. "Clara, you hungry?" She nodded. Her voice was too raw to speak more than that. She didn't say much the next few days. Stayed quiet, polite. Helped sweep the barn without being asked. Fed the chickens. Her hands were skilled, but she flinched whenever Dusty came near like she'd been kicked before. Her wrists bore the faint marks of rope. And once, when Cal accidentally dropped a pan, she ducked as though expecting a blow. He didn't ask. Not yet. One afternoon, as the sun dropped low and the sky turned orange over the hills, she stood out by the corral fence, watching the horses. Cal approached slow. "You ride?" he asked. She nodded. "Used to." He waited. "My uncle had a gray mare," she said after a long pause. Her name was Olive. She liked to kick the stall wall, just for fun. "Sounds like a pain." She was, Clara said. Then she smiled a little. First time he'd seen her do that. "But she never threw me." Something tightened in Cal's chest. "You could take her out if you want." "The small one, Sage, she's gentle." Clara didn't move, just kept staring at the horses. It wouldn't be safe. For her. He didn't know what that meant, but he didn't press. That night, he heard her crying. Quiet, muffled sobs through the thin walls of the cabin. Cal didn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen, hands clasped, jaw clenched, knowing better than to go to her. Sometimes silence was the kindest thing you could give someone. But the more he watched her, the more something inside him began to shift. She'd been trying to disappear into the river, and now she moved through his world like someone waiting to be erased. He wanted to pull her back, to give her a reason not to go again. He just didn't know how. A week passed. Then two. Clara began to talk a little more, though never about her past. She helped patch a broken fence and knew how to twist wire with precision. She carved little animals from scrap wood when she thought no one was looking. Cal found one of them, an elk, and left it on the mantel. She never asked who placed it there, but every kindness he offered, she seemed to brace against, like it was a trick she'd learned to expect. One evening, during supper, she finally asked, "Why did you pull me out?" Cal set down his fork. "Because I saw you." "That's not what I meant." He looked at her across the table. Her face was still thin, but her eyes held something steadier now. "I don't let people drown," he said simply, "even when they want to." She didn't speak for a while. Then quietly, "You should have." And with that, she stood and went to her room, leaving Cal staring at the cold food in front of him, unsure how to hold the weight of a person who didn't believe they were worth saving. But he knew one thing. That girl had been running from something far worse than water. And whatever it was, it hadn't stopped chasing her. 3 weeks had passed since Clara came out of the river, and though she moved quieter than a breeze through dry grass, the air around the ranch had started to change. Cal noticed it first in a way he no longer rode out at dawn just to get away from the silence of his own kitchen. Now he found himself lingering, fixing a second cup of coffee, checking the same gate twice, listening for her steps on the porch. Clara was still a mystery, but he had stopped trying to solve her like a puzzle. Some things needed to be earned, not forced. He didn't ask more about what had happened. He'd seen the scars, the flinching, the way her body stiffened when she heard a man's voice behind her. He saw how she avoided the mirror in the washroom. The truth would come, or it wouldn't. Either way, he wouldn't send her back to whatever hell she'd crawled out of. Then one morning, trouble came up the road. The ranch's only neighbor, B. Granger, rode in on a mule with her youngest boy, Eli, trailing behind on foot. B, sharp as a knife, could outshoot most men on the frontier. She raised 5 kids alone after her husband died in a barn fire, and she had no use for liars or fools. She dismounted and waved at Cal, her face drawn tight. "You got company," she said, nodding toward Clara, who was bent over the chicken coop with her back to them. "She the one?" Cal frowned. "What one?" "Girl the sheriff's been asking about. Went missing up near Rock Hollow. Her pa's been raising hell. Says she ran off with a drifter and took his money." Clara had straightened when she heard the voices, but didn't turn around. "She doesn't look like she stole anything," Cal said, keeping his voice even. "Maybe she didn't," he replied. "But if her folks come sniffing around here, you'll want to be ready." He nodded. "Thanks for the warning." He looked over at Clara again, then softened just a little. "Poor thing looks like she's been through hell backwards. You want? I could take her for a spell. Won't be no judgment." "No," Cal said quietly. "She stays." He gave a long look, then nodded. "All right." But I keep a gun loaded, Rourke. She rode off, Eli waving a small goodbye. Cal watched them disappear down the path before turning to Clara, who was now standing still, her arms wrapped around herself. "You hear all that?" he asked. She nodded. "You want to tell me what part of it was true?" Clara took a long breath. "My name's not Clara," she said. "It's Rosalie." Cal felt something shift inside him. Not surprise exactly, just confirmation of what he already knew. "My stepfather," she said, voice low. "He's the one who told the sheriff I ran off. He's a reason I did." "He—" She stopped, eyes closing, breath shuddering. "He's not right in the head. He's mean, and he's got folks fooled. Says prayers in front of crowds, then turns around and uses his belt on girls half his size." Cal didn't say anything. He just stood beside her, watching the breeze move the grass. "I didn't take anything," she whispered. "Only thing I stole was a coat from the stable, so I wouldn't freeze." "You're not going back," he said. "Not if I've got anything to say about it." She looked at him, something like relief flickering behind her tired eyes. "You believe me?" "I do." And just like that, the weight between them lightened just enough for her to breathe. The days after that, Rosalie, no longer Clara, began to open up in pieces. Not all at once, but slowly, like someone testing the water before wading in. She told him about her mother's death 2 winters ago, about how her stepfather, John Worth, had moved them onto a preacher's land in Rock Hollow, saying they'd live decent now. But behind closed doors, he drank and hit and told her God would forgive anything he did so long as she didn't tell. "I used to count," she said one night by the fire, "how many days I could go without crying. I thought maybe if I was quiet enough, still enough, he'd forget I was there." Cal looked at her across the room. "That's no way to live." She nodded. "That's why I tried to stop." He knew what she meant. Not just the river. All of it. The running. The breathing. The hurting. That same week, Cal's brother, Levi, showed up without warning. He came in off the trail, dust on his boots, and a cigar hanging from his mouth. Levi wore city clothes now and claimed to be in land business, though Cal suspected more gambling than business ever got done. "Damn, Cal," Levi said, throwing his saddlebags on the porch. "You look rough. Who's the girl?" Cal stood stiff. "Her name's Rosalie. She's staying a while." Levi's eyes flicked toward her, longer than Cal liked. "Pretty name. She's not your business." "Sure," Levi said, holding up his hands. "Just passing through." Rosalie kept her distance, but Cal noticed how she didn't go near the barn when Levi was there, didn't turn her back to him. On the third day, Levi got drunk and started talking too loud at supper. "You sure about this, Cal?" he slurred, eyes glassy. "She's a looker, and broken girls got a way of causing trouble." Cal stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. "Say another word, and you won't be welcome here." Levi laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Fine, fine. Don't say I didn't warn you." He left the next morning, taking his dust and his bad breath with him. But Rosalie stayed quiet after that, withdrawn again, like even just the memory of being seen as something available had knocked her back 10 steps. Cal hated himself for letting Levi through the door. That night, she finally said something. "I used to think men only wanted 2 things, work out of you, or flesh." Cal looked at her from across the table, slow and sure. "I'm not most men." She gave him a tired smile. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Then there was old Silas, the ranch hand who came twice a month to check fence lines and shoe the horses. He was grizzled, missing half a finger, and always smelled like pipe smoke and dust. But he had a kind word for Rosalie and showed her how to oil a saddle without letting the leather crack. "She's got good hands," Silas said one afternoon as Cal handed him a water pail. "Not scared of hard work, even if she flinches at sudden noise. She's been through worse than most." Silas nodded. "Well, keep her close. Something about that girl feels hunted." Cal knew it too, could feel in the way Rosalie watched the road, in the way she paused before every door, listening, as if one wrong move would send her right back into the dark. And then came the letter. No return name, no signature, just a plain note dropped at the general store and passed into Cal's hand the next time he rode into town. I know you have her. She belongs home. Return her, or the law will make you. Cal read the note 3 times before tucking it into his coat. When he got home, he burned in the stove and didn't tell Rosalie. Not yet, because one thing was clear: John Worth hadn't stopped looking. And now that he knew where to look, the quiet safety Cal had built for her was about to crack wide open. Spring crept in slow that year. The cold didn't leave all at once. It lingered in the wind, curled beneath the floorboards, clung to the mornings like a ghost that refused to be driven off. But the light began to change. The trees budded green, wildflowers bloomed beside the pasture fence, and Rosalie, bit by bit, started to look like someone who wanted to stay alive. It didn't happen suddenly. There was no grand moment of transformation. It came in pieces, a smile that lasted longer, a question asked without hesitation, her shoulders not always tense like she was bracing for a blow. Cal saw it most in the quiet parts of the day, the way she began humming when sweeping the porch, or how she leaned into the sun when feeding the horses, face tilted up like she'd forgotten what it felt like to be warm. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky turn lavender, Cal handed her a worn harmonica. "It's old," he said, "but it still plays." Rosalie turned it in her hands, fingers brushing the dents. "You play?" "Used to. Not much anymore." She lifted it slowly, lips just barely touching the edge, and played a soft, unsure note. It warbled. She laughed, just a little, surprised by the sound, and tried again. Cal leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes as a broken, clumsy melody filled the space between them. The tune didn't matter. It was the trying. And he hadn't heard laughter like that in his home in years. That same week, she rode Sage for the first time. Cal saddled the mare, gave her the reins, and stepped back. Rosalie didn't say a word, just stroked Sage's neck and climbed up. Her back was straight, eyes forward, her hands light on the reins. They rode the upper ridge together, the wind in their hair, neither saying much. Cal rode beside her, not leading, not following, just matching her pace. "I thought I forgot how to breathe when I ran," she said suddenly, halfway down the slope. "You didn't." She looked over at him, hair whipping around her face. "I think I'm starting to remember how." Another day, she found him working on the barn roof, hammering in a new board after a storm had cracked the old one. Without asking, she climbed the ladder and sat beside him, holding out nails when he needed them, steadying the wood with both hands. "You don't have to help," he said, glancing at her. She shrugged. "I want to." He didn't say anything, just passed her the next nail. They worked like that for hours, quiet, steady. At one point, their hands brushed. She didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. That night, Cal cooked stew, and Rosalie made biscuits from scratch, using flour she'd found in the pantry and a recipe scribbled on the back of an old envelope. The cabin smelled like home, something Cal hadn't felt in a long, long time. As the days stretched into weeks, the rhythm between them grew stronger. She asked about his past, and he told her about the war, the blood, the nightmares, the friend he buried with his own hands. She listened without turning her eyes away. When she asked if he ever thought about leaving, he said yes once. But then he came back because the land was the only place that didn't lie to him. "I think I understand that," she said. Cal found a sketch in the hayloft one day. Charcoal on old canvas. It was a drawing of Sage, mid-gallop, her mane flying. The lines were full of motion, alive. He recognized Rosalie's handwriting on the edge. "You're not what he said you were." He didn't ask her about it, just pinned it on the barn wall where she'd see it every morning. But despite the quiet healing, there was still a shadow between them. Some nights, Rosalie would stand at the window, staring out at the road. Her hands twisted the edge of her dress. Her breathing went shallow, and Cal knew she was still waiting for something, or someone. One late afternoon, as clouds gathered and the smell of rain thickened in the air, Rosalie sat on the porch with her sketchbook. Cal sat beside her, arms folded, watching the horizon. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. I have, he said, but everything I ever ran from found me anyway. Rosalie nodded slowly. I used to dream of the coast. Water, so wide you couldn't see the end of it. I used to think if I made it that far, he couldn't find me. Maybe one day you'll get there. You think I could? Her voice was barely above a whisper. He turned toward her. I know you could. Her eyes met his. For the first time, she didn't look away. I don't want to go yet. That night, it rained so hard the wind rattled the roof. They stayed inside, warm by the stove. Cal read aloud from a book, one he hadn't touched in years. Rosalie sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching the firelight. Every now and then, she'd look up, and he'd catch her watching him. Not fearful, not guarded, just watching, like she was trying to see who he really was. The next morning, she left a drawing by his plate. It was of him sitting in the rocking chair, a far-off look in his eyes, the harmonica in his lap. Underneath, she'd written, "You saved me, but you don't even know what that means yet." He didn't say anything, just folded the drawing and tucked it into the pocket of his coat. Then came the day of the fair. Cal hadn't planned on going, but Rosalie surprised him, holding up a dress she'd mended and saying, "I'd like to see what's out there." So they went. The town of Cedar Bend was bustling. Laughter, horses, music. Cal felt stiff in his shoulders, but Rosalie moved with curiosity, eyes wide at every booth, every child running past. She bought a piece of honeycomb candy and shared it with him, her face lighting up at the taste. A fiddler played near the center square, and couples danced. Rosalie didn't ask, but she stood close enough that her hand brushed his arm. Cal, never one for crowds or noise, found himself wishing the night would stretch on forever. Later, as they walked past the bakery, Rosalie stopped. "That's him." Cal followed her gaze. Across the square stood a man in a dark coat, heavy set, thick beard streaked with gray. John Worth. His face was red from the cold and drink. His eyes scanned the crowd like a predator. Cal moved in front of her instinctively. "Go," he said. "Get back to the wagon. But I'll be right behind you." "Now, Rosalie." She ran. Cal walked straight up to John, planting himself in the man's path. "You've got no right." John started, but Cal cut him off. "She's not yours. She's my stepdaughter, and she's coming home. Only way she's leaving is over my dead body." John's lip curled. "You think I won't drag her back? That girl's been nothing but trouble since she could walk. I think if you touch her again, I'll bury you right here in this dirt." They stood inches apart, the town square suddenly quiet around them. Then John sneered, spit at the ground, and walked away. Cal didn't move until the man disappeared into the alley. When he returned to the wagon, Rosalie was sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, face pale. "He saw me. He's not taking you." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't sob. She just reached for Cal's hand and held it tight the entire way home. Back at the ranch, everything felt different. The world had shifted again, the safety shaken. Rosalie didn't sleep that night. Neither did Cal. The next day, she followed him to the creek. They sat on the same rock where he'd first pulled her out of the water. "You think he'll come back?" she asked. "I know he will." Rosalie nodded. "Then I should go, before he hurts you." "You're not going anywhere," he said. She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "Why do you care so much?" He didn't speak right away. Then he said, "Because I've been alone a long time, and I didn't realize how cold it was until you started warming the place up." Her lip trembled. "I don't know how to love anybody. I only ever learned how to survive. Then we'll learn the rest together." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. For a long time, they sat like that, the creek rushing beneath them, the past looming just behind. But for the first time, the future didn't seem so far. 2 weeks passed, and the quiet began to feel like a lie again. Not the peaceful kind that soothed the skin, but the thick, heavy kind that crept into the bones, the kind that meant something was waiting just out of sight. Cal knew it. Rosalie felt it too. She stopped drawing. She no longer rode sage past the tree line. She barely left the porch. It was as if John Worth's face that night in town had crawled back inside her, taken up residence where hope had just started to bloom. She didn't talk much anymore. And when she did, her voice had gone flat, the life drained out of it. Cal tried to draw her out, but she only offered half smiles and shrugged answers. Even the harmonica stayed untouched on the shelf. One evening, he found her in the barn, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring into the corner like she was listening to something only she could hear. "You all right?" he asked gently. She didn't move. "He used to lock me in places like this," she said. "Not for hours, for days. Said it was for my own good. That the devil needed quiet to leave me." Cal's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. He walked over, crouched beside her, placed his hand on the dirt floor. "My mother was already gone by then," she whispered. She thought he'd been touched by God. She never saw the way he changed once the door closed. She looked at him, something dark and quiet swirling in her eyes. "I think part of me still believes him, that I must have done something to deserve it." "You didn't," Cal said. "Not then. Not now. Never." But even as he said it, he saw that she wasn't sure she believed him. Her fear wasn't just of John, it was deeper. She feared herself, feared that something in her had invited the pain, that she was stained in a way she couldn't scrub clean. The next day, she woke with a scream. Cal rushed in to find her tangled in the bed sheets, drenched in sweat, hands curled into fists. She didn't recognize him at first. She fought like she was still trapped in that barn corner, still locked in that dark. He wrapped his arms around her, held her as she kicked and sobbed, and begged someone to stop. Only when he whispered her name, "Rosalie, you're safe, you're home," did she finally come back. After that, she barely left the cabin for days. Cal kept himself busy, giving her space. But the more space he gave, the further she drifted. He didn't know how to reach her when she retreated that deep. Every time he tried, she shut down or changed the subject. Sometimes he heard her crying behind the closed door and didn't knock, afraid she'd pull further away if he did. One night, she surprised him by coming to sit beside him by the fire. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were steady. "I think I know why I came out of the water that day," she said. He looked at her, saying nothing. "Part of me wanted to die," she whispered, "but some small part wanted to see if someone would try to stop me. If anyone still cared. I didn't think anyone would." "You were wrong," Kel said softly. "I don't want to be a weight on your life," she said. "You deserve better than a woman who wakes up screaming and thinks love is the same as punishment." "I don't want someone perfect," he said. "I want you, even when you're hurting, even when it's hard." She leaned her head against his shoulder, quiet for a long time. "Do you think people like us can have a future? Or are we just survivors trying to fool ourselves into thinking we're still whole?" Cole took a breath. "Maybe we were broken, but even broken things can be mended, sometimes stronger than they were before." For a moment, the fire crackled between them, the only sound in the room. Then Rosalie said something that cut deep in its softness. "I don't know how to let someone love me without feeling like I owe them something." "You don't owe me anything," Cal said. "Not one damn thing." But even as he said it, she pulled away. "I'm tired, Cal." And she was, not just from lack of sleep, but from the war inside her that never let up. That night, she packed a small bag, left a note on the table. "I need to find my own way to heal. If I stay, I'm afraid I'll depend on you instead of fixing what's broken in me. I don't want to lose what we have by not being ready to hold it." She was gone before sunup. Cal found the note while making coffee. He read it 3 times before sitting down in the chair where she used to draw. Her scent was still there. So was the silence. This one cut deeper than all the others he'd known before. He didn't chase her. Not yet. Maybe because he understood. Maybe because he was afraid if he brought her back too soon, she'd only disappear again. Rosalie walked south along the river. She found work in a widow's kitchen in a town called Willow Bend. Cleaned floors, made bread, slept in a loft above the pantry where she could hear every creak of the house. It wasn't safe, not really, but it was hers. Each day, she tried to forget the way Cal looked when he laughed, the way his hands felt steady on her back when the nightmares came, the way he'd simply said, "You stay," that first night, without asking for her story. She wrote to him, but didn't send the letters. Folded them into her apron pocket and carried them like secrets. In the quiet moments, she read them back to herself. One day, a girl came to the kitchen with a bruised face. Rosalie watched the girl scrub dishes, eyes downcast. She recognized that posture, the way fear folds a person small. That night, she found the girl behind the stable crying. "Don't go back," Rosalie said softly. The girl looked up, startled. "He's all I got." Rosalie knelt beside her. "No, he isn't." The next morning, Rosalie handed the girl a bundle of bread and coins. "Keep walking. Don't stop until the sky feels bigger than your fear." The girl left. Rosalie watched her go, and in doing so, realized something. She wasn't that same girl by the river anymore. She had something now: strength, voice, a will to live. But there was also something missing, someone. That night, she finally sent a letter. "Cal, I don't know if you'll forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it. But I want to come home. Not just to your ranch. To you. If the offer still stands." Cal received it 5 days later. He read it in the barn, standing beside Sage's stall. He didn't wait. He saddled the horse, packed a small bag, and rode south. He found her in the bakery's kitchen, flour on her face, sleeves rolled up. She didn't see him at first, but when she did, her eyes filled so fast, she had to sit down before she fell. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she whispered. "I was always coming," Cal said. "I just needed you to ask." That night, she rode back with him, said goodbye to the widow, to the small town where she'd started over. It had served its purpose. Back at the ranch, the hills were turning green again. The barn stood quiet. The porch swing creaked in the breeze. Rosalie stepped inside and let the door close behind her like a sigh. She turned to Cal. "I still have dark days. I'll sit with you through all of them. I'm not the same girl you pulled from the water. I wouldn't want you to be." And that night, for the first time, she let him hold her. Not like a savior, not like someone she owed, but like a man who'd waited patiently for her to come back whole. She wasn't healed, not entirely, but she was here. And that was enough for now. A week after Rosalie returned to the ranch, the sky broke open with a spring storm. Rain came fast and cold, pelting the roof and drumming hard against the window panes. Thunder echoed across the valley, shaking the barn doors and driving the cattle in tight. Inside the cabin, Cal stood with his back to the fire, arms crossed, eyes watching Rosalie as she leaned against the window, her face unreadable. He could feel it, something stirring beneath her silence, something pressing forward. The storm outside wasn't half as loud as the one building in her chest. That morning, a rider had passed through with news. John Worth had been seen in Sundown County, preaching again. He'd gathered a few men around him, wild-eyed, hungry men who followed him like they needed to believe something terrible was holy. The rider hadn't known Rosalie, but he'd spoken freely, unaware of the name's weight in that cabin. Cal had watched her go pale as the words sank in. And since then, she'd said almost nothing. Now, as lightning lit up the walls, she finally turned to him. "He never stopped," she said. "He just moved on to hurt someone else. Maybe a girl who looks like I used to. Maybe younger." "Rosalie," Cal said carefully, but she held up a hand. "I let him do it," she whispered. "For years. I stayed. I kept quiet. I smiled in front of others. I thought if I followed his rules, I'd survive." "You did survive," Cal said. Her voice rose. "But at what cost? I still hear his voice in my head, Cal. I still feel him when I close my eyes. He's still got pieces of me, and I don't know how to get them back." He stepped toward her, slow. "Then let's take them back." "How?" she demanded. "How do you fight someone like that? How do you fight a ghost?" "You stop letting him live in your silence." The wind howled. A tree branch snapped and hit the side of the house. Rosalie flinched, but Cal didn't look away. He saw it. The rage buried under her sorrow. The deep, festering grief she'd carried since girlhood. The feeling of being small and wrong and broken. "I hate him," she breathed. "I hate what he did to me. I hate that I believed him. I hate that a part of me still wants his approval." "Then say it," Cal said. "Say it all. Scream it, throw it, burn it down. Whatever it takes." but don't keep it inside anymore." And she did. She screamed. Not a ladle-like cry or a hidden sob, but a full-body, raw, trembling scream. The kind that shattered something invisible. She screamed until her throat hurt, until her legs gave out, and she slid to the floor, sobbing with her face in her hands. Cal knelt beside her, arms wrapped around her shoulders, saying nothing. Just holding her through the storm, through the undoing. When her cries quieted, she spoke again. "He used to say God would punish me if I ever left, that I'd be nothing without him, that the world would spit me out." "He lied," Cal said. She nodded slowly, then wiped her face. "I want to see him." Cal tensed. "What for?" "I don't know yet, but I need to see him. I need to tell him he didn't destroy me. I need to look him in the eye and not feel afraid." He didn't argue. He knew better. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about reclaiming her voice, her body, her name. So 2 days later, they saddled the horses and rode for Sundown County. The trip took half a day. The land changed as they crossed state lines. Drier, wind-bitten hills, crumbling fences, and rust-colored dust that clung to their boots. At the edge of town stood a makeshift chapel, more shack than church. A painted sign read, "Shepherd's Voice Ministry." Pastor John Worth. Rosalie stopped her horse outside the fence. The place looked exactly like it had when she first met him. It chilled her how unchanged it was. Like he'd paused in time while she'd been crawling through years of wreckage. Cal offered to go in with her, but she shook her head. "If I don't walk in alone, I'll never believe I'm strong enough." She stepped down from the saddle and walked to the chapel. Inside, John Worth stood before a dozen followers, reading from a cracked Bible. His beard was grayer now, his frame heavier, but the voice hadn't changed. Still soft, still poisonous. When he saw her, he faltered, just for a second. "Rosalie," he said, lowering the book. "You've come home." She didn't sit. She stayed in the back, standing straight. "I'm not here for you," she said. "I'm here to tell you I survived you." Murmurs rippled through the room. John narrowed his eyes. "You left the path, child, but it's not too late. You can still be cleansed." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You don't get to cleanse me. You don't get to own my pain anymore. You were weak, Rosalie. You needed structure. Without me, you'd have. I found someone," she cut in, "someone who held me without asking for anything back. Someone who didn't want to own me, who didn't need me to shrink to feel powerful." John's face twisted. His voice dropped. "You think the world will understand you? That a man like him will stay once he sees what you are?" "I am what I am," she said. "Flawed, scarred, angry, but free. I'm not your prisoner anymore." He stepped forward. "You think you can come in here and rewrite the past?" "No, but I can make peace with it. And that starts with walking out of here and never giving you another second of my soul." She turned and left. Cal was waiting by the fence. She didn't speak right away, just wrapped her arms around herself. Her breath came hard and fast, like she'd just run a long distance. He stepped beside her. "You okay?" "No," she said, "but I will be." They rode back in silence, the air cool with dusk. Somewhere between the chapel and the ranch, she reached over and brushed his hand with hers. Just for a second, but it was enough. That night, Rosalie took the drawings she'd hidden under the floorboards and burned them in the fireplace. Not out of shame, but because she didn't need them anymore. The images of pain, of faceless figures in dark rooms, they'd served their purpose. They had spoken for her when she couldn't. Now she had her own voice. She turned to Cal, who was fixing the broken latch on the front door. "I want to rebuild the barn loft." He looked up, brows raised. "For what?" "For me. A studio, maybe. A place to work. To think. To breathe." He nodded. "We'll start tomorrow." That night, she slept without screaming. Not perfectly, not all the way through. But when she did wake, breath caught in her throat, she found Cal's hand resting lightly over hers. And for once, that was enough to calm the storm. Spring bled quietly into summer, soft winds sweeping the hills and wildflowers blooming along the fence line. The barn loft took shape slowly. Cal refused to rush it. Each plank he laid, Each nail he hammered, he did beside Rosalie. Not because she needed him to, but because she wanted to. That was new. Wanting without fear. Building something without the shadow of loss leaning over it. Rosalie filled the space with light and quiet colors. A small table by the window. A canvas on the wall. The smell of fresh pine and sun-warmed dust. It wasn't a place to hide. It was a place to begin. On some mornings, she sat there and let the breeze touch her skin like it was washing something old off her. On others, she painted, not with the heaviness of memory, but with the simple need to express. One evening, while the sun dropped low and gold into the pasture, Cal found her up there barefoot, sleeves rolled up, paint smudged across her knuckles. She turned when he came in. There was a look on her face, peaceful but open, like she had something to say she wasn't afraid of anymore. "I've never thanked you," she said, her voice low. "You don't owe me that," Cal replied. "Maybe not, but I want to." He nodded, walking closer. "All right then, let's hear it." She smiled faintly. "You didn't fix me, and that's why I love you. You saw the broken pieces and didn't flinch." He reached out, touched the side of her face. "I loved you the moment you threw that rock through the window," he said. She laughed, shaking her head. "I was feral. You were brave." They stood close, not rushing, not pretending. There was no speech, no grand gesture. Just the gentle press of her hand against his chest and the quiet way he leaned in and kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper, like everything unspoken between them had found a home. It wasn't the desperate kind of kiss that tries to erase pain. It was the kind that honors it. That says, "I know where you've been. I've seen the scars. I still choose you." That night, they made love for the first time. It was slow, careful. Rosalie trembled at first, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen entirely. She let him touch the parts she'd once flinched to show, and when he looked at her with nothing but tenderness, something inside her finally let go. He never rushed, never asked for more than she gave. When she whispered, "I'm not broken anymore," he didn't answer. He just kissed her again, letting her say it for herself. In the morning, she woke before him. The windows were cracked open, sunlight spilling over the bed like honey. Cal's hand rested lightly on her hip, his breath slow, peaceful. She lay still, listening to the world beyond the walls, the birds, the wind, the creak of the old porch swing. She didn't feel haunted. For the first time in years, her body felt like hers. Her mind wasn't racing. Her heart wasn't holding its breath. There was still pain, yes, but it had softened. It no longer ruled her. Later, as they sat together on the porch steps, Rosalie leaned against his shoulder and said, "I'd like to teach again. Not in a schoolhouse. Something smaller. Girls who've been through it. Girls like I was." Cal looked over at her proud. "You'd be good at that." She smiled. "I know." A hawk circled high above, cutting slow loops in the sky. Down in the pasture, Sage trotted lazily through tall grass, tail swishing. "You think it'll last?" she asked quietly. "What?" "This piece." Cal thought a moment. "I think it won't always be this easy, but I think we'll keep choosing each other, and that'll be enough." She turned to him. "It already is." The door creaked behind them. The house still needed fixing in places. The land wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And in that moment, Rosalie knew. She was no longer the girl in the river. She was the woman who'd walked back out, who had found love not in rescue, but in freedom. The ghosts still whispered sometimes, but they didn't hold the reins anymore. She did.